Good morning, you join me here at Glasgow Queen Street. That behind me there is a Class 43 HST set. These operate with ScotRail, and as of January of 2026, these are the last HST sets in passenger operations. These insanely iconic trains have been dwindling in numbers ever since, well, the early to mid 2000s, and soon it might be time to say goodbye for good. So now that the ScotRail Inter7Cities are the last HST sets in operation, I thought it would be fitting to have a ride on them myself. So come join me as we have a brief look into the history of the HST trains and the history of the ScotRail Inter7City HSTs. First, I'm going to grab this HST train up from Glasgow all the way to Perth or Stirling, I haven't decided yet, where we'll talk a little bit about the general history of the HST trains. Hello, you join me at Perth station. Now I wasn't expecting to come up here, but in the end the ticket was like £5 more and I was like, why not? Now this station is actually an incredibly strange one. It feels so desolate. I think it's got 7 platforms. It opened in 1848, and for the service that it gets around 4, 5, 6 trains an hour. To have 7 platforms, yeah, it feels almost abandoned. There's this incredible Victorian train shed which just feels so desolate, and it's so dark in there. It feels like you've gone back in time, really. So then let's have a little brief history about the HSTs. I'm sure everybody watching this video knows what a HST is. The high-speed train, the Intercity 125, probably the most iconic train that Britain has produced in a long time. Now the origins of the HSTs come back to the 1960s and 70s, when British Rail were looking for a new standard of intercity diesel train that they could roll out across the country, mostly from their London termini, but also for other services. I'm being interrupted. Now at this time, British Rail didn't have too much money, so electrification wasn't really possible. So they had to get a new diesel high-speed train. Now they wanted this train to be sort of the standard for intercity travel across Britain's rail network. And so they started designing on a new high-speed 125-mile-an-hour diesel train. They would have 2 locomotives, which would be identical, and then they would have a rake of carriages in between, which would also negate the need for shunting at a terminus station. British Rail wanted a low axle weight on these trains to ensure maximum efficiency at high speeds and to avoid too much damage to the track. The first prototype was the Class 41. This began testing in 1972 after it was built by British Rail Engineering Limited in Crewe. It was a success, and the Class 43 HST was born. This was going to be the new standard train for intercity services. Class 41 was a success. They refined and improved on it. They changed the design a bit. It looks a lot nicer, the 43, compared to the 41. And this was going to be the locomotive that was going to be rolled out for intercity services. They're going to be paired with the Mark III carriages, which I've already talked about in a recent video. These Mark III carriages were going to be built to a very high design quality. They're probably going to be the most futuristic train carriages that Britain had made, the most modern. They're capable of 125-mile-an-hour operation. They were going to be very luxurious, incredible ride quality, etc, etc. 197 initial locomotives were constructed for use basically across Britain, but mostly in the southwest and on the west coast main line. The HSTs were built from 1975 all the way to 1982 and entered service in 1976. The 43s would eventually operate nationwide. East Coast, West Coast main lines, cross-country routes, Midland main line, perhaps most famously the Great Western main line, but they operated pretty much anywhere and everywhere. Now their engines would be pretty interesting. Now I could do a whole video on the engines of the HSTs. I know there's a lot of people who are very interested in that sort of thing. I'm not too knowledgeable about it, but I know the original engines were the Valenta engines. I think they're quite famous. Now, a lot of people who like the HSTs think that the Valentas are the best engines that the HSTs have ever had. However, they did have to be replaced. I think the last of the Valenta engines were in the Midland Mainline Class 43s, and they were all replaced by the new Paxman VP185 engines. The HSTs were hugely successful. They transformed journey times, 125-mile-an-hour journeys in silky smooth travel with great comfort, very nice first class and standard class seating, and this was sort of the rise of Intercity as a brand. British Rail rolled out the Intercity branding a few years after the Intercity 125s entered service, and there was a big marketing campaign. The train could now compete with the car, it was quicker than the car, and it significantly improved journeys across the intercity routes that British Rail operated. The Class 43s themselves were extremely successful locomotives. Not only were they pretty reliable, but they were also dead quick. They were actually, for quite a while, the world's fastest locomotive, the world's fastest diesel train full stop. I think they went up to 148 miles an hour on a test in 1987. They were beaten by a Russian diesel train, but that's since been withdrawn. So currently the world's fastest diesel train in service are the Class 43s. Now, just 10, 15, 20 years after entry into service, the 43s were now going to be handed over to private train operators. Of course, they operated with a bunch of operators, including First Great Western Railway, Midland Main Line, East Midlands Trains, East Midlands Railway, Virgin Trains, West Coast and East Coast, and all the other East Coast mainline operators, Virgin Trains Cross Country, Arriva Cross Country. I could go on. There's a lot of operators which operated the Class 43 and HST trains, but obviously you don't need me to talk about the last 5-10 years. The HSTs have been slowly but surely withdrawn from our rail network. They are life expired. They were built in the 70s and 80s. They're now, getting on to be 40 years old. The Mark III coaches are getting on to be 50 years old. So yeah, I think it's probably fair enough to say that the HSTs are life expired. Now obviously Great Western Railway, London North Eastern Railway replaced theirs with the IET and Azuma trains. Virgin replaced theirs quite a while back on the west coast with the new Pendolinos and Voyagers. Cross Country, they infamously had to withdraw their HST sets, even though they were not replaced by anything. It was just a reduction in capacity because they were getting old and somewhat unreliable. East Midlands, they've replaced theirs with Class 180s, 222s and Class 360s, thanks to the electrification of the Midland Main Line. And any other operator which I've missed who operates HSTs have also withdrawn their trains. The Mark III coaches, which were built for the HSTs, are still lingering on. At the time of recording, they're still in service with Chiltern Railways, but they are also being withdrawn and replaced by the Mark V-As. Great Western Railway still have some for their sleeper night Riviera service, but that's only one train a day. So really, if you want a Mark III, if you want a HST, your only port of call is here in Scotland, with the last HST sets in England being withdrawn in December 2025 when Great Western Railway's Castle class trains were withdrawn and replaced by Class 175s. So it really is an end of an era. We are left with just a handful of HST sets in the UK, and it will be sad when the final ones go. It is worth noting quite a few are in freight and departmental use. Network Rail have a few, Colas Rail, Rail Adventure, a few other freight companies have a few of the Class 43 power cars. But of course, HST sets, as we know and love them, aren't really in operation anymore because there's no long form, long distance, purely intercity trains. Even the ScotRail services, which we'll talk about a little bit later, are slightly more, I would say, regional services perhaps, not purely intercity ones. So yeah, that sort of segues quite nicely into talking about the ScotRail Inter7Cities, and we're going to be doing exactly that at Stirling station. So I'm going to wait. It's raining as well, I really need to get some shelter. I am rather cold and wet, so I'm going to wait for this next Inter7City train to take us to Stirling. It's only a 20-minute, half-an-hour hop down to Stirling, which will be our third city of the day in Scotland. We'll talk a little bit about the Inter7Cities, why they are with ScotRail and their operations, and potentially their withdrawal in the next few years. I'll see you in Stirling. You join me back here at Perth. Long story short, I sort of went into town and then missed the next Inter7City departure back towards Glasgow and Stirling. So instead I'm going to get this 158 down to Stirling, then we're going to catch the next Inter7City HST set all the way back to Glasgow. This hasn't actually changed anything really, we're still getting the same amount of HSTs. If I made the earlier HST, I would have just got this train back to Glasgow. So yeah, it basically means not much is changing. We're going to get this 158 to Stirling and then get the HST down to Glasgow. So I will see you at Stirling. Hello, you join me here at Stirling station. This is a major junction station. So this is probably one of the largest stations on the former Caledonian main line and what is now the Glasgow to Dundee line. The station here was electrified in 2018, I believe. Major works were done. The footbridge that you can see behind me, the right-of-way pedestrian footbridge, had to be lifted up to allow for wires to be installed, and electrification was done as far as Dunblane, which is just north of us that our train stopped at, and also down to Alloa. Yeah, 8 platform stations, a big one, this one. It gets good service into Edinburgh and Glasgow. But here at Stirling, let's have a little talk about the Inter7Cities with ScotRail. Now in 2018, Abellio ScotRail confirmed that they were going to be taking on 9 4-carriage and 17 5-carriage shortened HST trains, which are going to be brought into service. These would be ex-Great Western Railway sets. So there would be 52 Class 43 power cars brought into ScotRail's fleet, and about 150 or so Mark III carriages. The trains would be brought in to sort of replace the Class 170s and 158s and displace them onto other routes. I believe some of the 170s headed off towards East Midlands and other operators, and they were cascaded somewhere else along Britain's rail network. So the HSTs were always going to be primarily used for long distance intercity regional services out of Glasgow and Edinburgh northwards towards like Inverness and Aberdeen and whatnot. 43021 and 132 were the first 2 power cars delivered to ScotRail, with all 26 sets refurbished in Brush Loughborough, gaining a new ScotRail livery, ScotRail branded interior, sliding doors which were also installed, similar to the Great Western Railway Castle class HST sets. The new HST sets were dubbed the Inter7City sets because it was an intercity service which served 7 major Scottish cities: Glasgow, Stirling, Perth, Inverness, Aberdeen and Dundee. On the 15th of October 2018, the first ScotRail HST Inter7City service ran from Edinburgh to Aberdeen, with full rollout coming in the December 2018 timetable change. The units were received pretty well. They were an upgrade to the old Turbostars and Sprinters that they replaced. They were faster and they were also nice inside. They offered a much better first-class product to what was there previously, with I think it's a fixed £15 upgrade or something. Pretty reasonably priced, especially if you're travelling all the way from Glasgow and Edinburgh up towards Aberdeen and Inverness. They ran pretty well until August of 2020, when a HST set was actually involved in the fatal Stonehaven derailment in Aberdeenshire. The 0638 Aberdeen to Glasgow service derailed at Stonehaven due to an earlier landslide which had gone undetected. The unit was travelling at 75 miles an hour, with 3 people sadly being killed, including the driver, the guard and another passenger. It was the first fatal rail crash in Britain since the Grey Rig disaster in 2007, the first HST fatal crash since Ufton Nervet in 2004 with the first Great Western HST set, and the first fatal landslide rail crash since Isgill in 1995. The crash prompted a review into the HST safety. They were, of course, approaching their 40th, 50th birthdays, and it was sort of determined that they shouldn't be around for much longer. The cabs are not the most secure. They're made with very weak materials, fiberglass, which when it gets hit front on is very prone to breaking and not making the driver very safe. And I think ASLEF had a bit of a go with ScotRail, rightly a go, because their drivers felt unsafe. And ever since then, ScotRail have been sort of wanting to withdraw the Class 43s. However, no official announcement has been given. Although Scottish HSTs might not have too long left, they have led to lasting improvements for Scotland's rail network. Several major depot enhancements have been undertaken, including a £33 million depot upgrade in Glasgow opening in January 2026. Catering has been added to the Inter7City services, including in first class, while ScotRail satisfaction improved by 30% from 2018 to 2019, partly due to the introduction of the new HST sets.
The HSTs have also had new wheel slide protection equipment installed in summer of 2025 to improve overall reliability. But the trains are still over 40 years old, and their time with us on the rail network is coming to a close.
So what about the withdrawal of the Inter7Cities? Well, there's no fixed date or confirmation of when the Inter7Cities are going to be going. We obviously assume it's going to be sooner rather than later. There's a train coming. There's been a lot of rumours about the Class 222s, the Meridian trains, which currently operate with East Midlands Railway down the Midland Main Line. Could they be heading up here to replace the HST trains? They are, of course, being withdrawn and replaced by the Class 810 Aurora trains. So they would serve quite well, I think, up here. They're pretty similar capacity. ScotRail have begun the procurement for the replacement of the Inter7Cities. They announced that they were going to be trying to find suitable replacements, which sort of led everybody to believe it would be the 222s. But since the start of 2025, obviously we're in 2026 now, we've had no confirmation about this procurement. So I guess we will have to wait and see. Knowing my luck, as soon as I upload this video, there'll be a huge announcement that the Inter7Cities will be going. I think it will be the 222s. I think it makes the most sense. They're going off lease. They haven't got a home at the moment, most of them. So I think it makes sense for them to come up north here in Scotland and replace ageing Inter7City trains. But what do you think? I personally really like these trains. I think their time is up. They're old. They're not the most safe, and of course I think safety is paramount on the railways. Inside, they're nice. The first class, I didn't sit on it, but I did walk through. It looked very nice. I'm sure you can find a lot of reviews on YouTube about the first class offering, so if you're interested in that, go search up another video. I believe there's catering on board. There is a trolley, but there's no like full food service on board. I'm not sure what first class passengers get, if they get anything complimentary. But yeah, I'm going to head down on the next Inter7City service down to Glasgow where we started, and I will say goodbye to you there. Let's get on this HST train then, my final one, probably, maybe, down to Glasgow, and I'll see you in Glasgow.
And I literally kept going.
Right then, made it back up there to Glasgow Queen Street on that 43 Inter7City set. I really like them. I can't believe I've only been on 2 today. It feels like I've been on like 4 or 5 or something. But yeah, really enjoyable day. I know there's only been 3 trains, but well, I haven't had time to do the most in-depth video in the world, but I hope you have enjoyed nonetheless. I just really want an excuse to get on these because they are cool trains. If you want to ride a HST set, you perhaps only have a year or 2 to do so, because I imagine they'll be replaced in the near future. They are cool. Now, this video could have been several hours long, going really in depth in the history of the HSTs. I sort of just wanted to do a brief overview and to go on what is now the last HST sets operating in the whole of the United Kingdom in passenger service, now that the Great Western Railway Castle class sets have gone. So it was just an excuse to ride them, really. But yeah, thank you very much for watching this video. Smash a like, subscribe, comment below. Do you have any good HST memories? Let me know in the comments below. I hope you've enjoyed though. Thank you very much for watching. Check out my Discord server, Blue Sky and Twitter in the links in the description below, and I'll see you around. Goodbye.
And of course, a huge thank you to all my YouTube and Patreon members, including my first class members Aaron Barry, Crispin McKee, JB Niel and Phil Smith. My business owned members Andrew Bowen, Anthony James Moore, ARK, Connor Gregg, Clive's Travelling Trains, Daniel Burford, Dave CDF, J Teco, Gallia Lev, Lewis C21, Martin Thomas, NJTE, Ollie G, OVTUG Alex, Real, SZWL, Train Life GB, Tom Kennedy, Welsh Train Enthusiast, Will Ho and Zach Renfrey, as well as my standard premium and standard class members. Your support means the world to me and helps me to make videos like this one possible. You can join the channel for as little as 99p per month and get access to exclusive members only videos and access to all my videos early before they release to the public. Thank you once again. Once again, thanks for watching. Check out my Twitter, Discord and Blue Sky in the links in the description below. Make sure you like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Goodbye.